Welcome down to the third masterclass for 2014 on startup soft skills. Tonight's a pretty important topic for a number of reasons, which I'll go through shortly. And what I will go through tonight are what are soft skills, why they're important, what you'll learn, some general stuff. I'll run through an example in terms of how you can interact from not knowing somebody at all, finding out about them, emailing them, having a meeting with them, all of these sorts of things. And then also some other kind of tips and tricks I've picked up along the way that will reduce friction when interacting with people. Startup soft skills are really, well, soft skills in any industry are important and just important generally, but in the startup ecosystem they're very important given the nature of that ecosystem, which I'll run through now. But first, before we begin, I'd like to start by asking, what are startup soft skills, or what are soft skills? So who'd like to take a crack at it? Ron.
Human interaction, networking, that sort of thing.
Human interaction, networking, good. What else do we have?
So etiquette and how you sort of standards around.
Etiquette, standards around etiquette. Fantastic. What else do we have?
It's not the technical stuff. It's not necessarily about the idea itself. It's about getting the idea, launching it, getting it across, selling.
Excellent point. They're not technical skills. Really good point. And it's more about the interactions with people. Z?
There's no right answer. It's a judgment kind of intuition thing.
Correct. There's a lot of different takes on how you might interact with people, and everyone has their own personality, which impacts how they engage with other people. Any other thoughts? Nope. Okay. I went to the Wikipedia page, as you do when you kind of do these sorts of talks, and they had some great stuff on it as well. Basically said that soft skills are associated with your emotional intelligence quotient. It's a cluster of personality traits around social graces, communication, language, personal habits, friendliness, and optimism that characterize their relationships with other people. And they're personal attributes that enhance an individual's interactions, job performance, and career prospects. Soft skills are incredibly important because, as this gentleman mentioned, we have technical skills. But technical skill is what you go through when you get an engineering degree or a medicine degree or a commerce degree, when you learn a technical trait, and you might do that day to day. But soft skills are what allow you to interact with people, which is what you're going to do regardless of what job you have and what industry you work in. Basically, soft skills plus hard skills equals skills. And they're really important. And I think when we talked before about startup velocity and how it's important to have a diverse skill set across a team when they apply or when they're trying to build a new product or a new business, a lot of people focus a lot of attention on building their technical skills, learning how to code, learning how to design, learning how to write a business plan, a pitch, all of these sorts of things. They're all technical skills. How much time do you actually spend working on your soft skills? How much time do you spend working on enhancing the quality of your communication with other people and ensuring that you get your points across, you don't annoy people, and you don't alienate people without being aware of it? And the answer to that, I would suspect, is resoundingly similar in that most people would spend far more time on their technical skills as opposed to their soft skills. And as you start your careers, whether you go into startups or you go into any industry, regardless of what industry that is, initially when you start work, you'll be doing mostly technical work. You'll be at the bottom of the totem pole doing technical work. Even if you're starting your own business, if you go and work at a big company like KPMG, IBM, a law firm, GE, anything like that, you'll be doing the technical work and you won't necessarily be needing to manage people. But as you rise in any career, you'll spend more time managing people and interacting with people to accomplish goals as opposed to doing the technical work yourself. And when you're the founder of a startup, soft skills are integral from the base up because you're trying to rally a whole lot of people around you for your vision. If you want customers, investors, advisors, or employees, you need to be able to pitch them on why they should join your startup. Customers, imagine how many times have you interacted with somebody and walked away and said, damn it, I wish I hadn't said that, I wish I'd come across a bit better, I've said something I didn't mean to say, or you didn't shed yourself in the best possible light. Every time you interact with a customer, you're trying to get them on board, and you're going to take them through a process, first of all meeting them and engaging with them, secondly trying to educate them about your product, thirdly trying to get them to sign up for a trial or perhaps go straight to the buy. All of these things, it's a relationship-based interaction. It's not a commodity. especially with investors, advisors, employees as well. You've got to pitch them on why they should join you on your journey. Do you have a brand? The reason I put that up there is if you go and work for a big company like IBM, GE, KPMG, whoever it might be, people will judge that company based on their brand. If you have a startup, they'll judge your company based on you because your company doesn't have a brand yet. You are a spokesman or spokeswoman for that brand and you represent that company. Do you have a good reputation? When you're starting your own business, chances are nobody really knows who you are unless you've already done it before or you're very involved in an industry and you've got a lot of experience in your career before going to start a business. So when you're starting out, when you're at university or when you're starting out having done a degree and not wanting to work in a corporate job, do you have a brand? Chances are you don't. The other one I really wanted to touch on was emotional bank balance. Has anyone heard of that term before? Has anyone heard of Stephen Covey before? You have. So do you want to share with us what the emotional bank balance is?
I haven't heard of emotional bank balance, but I know Stephen Covey.
Okay, cool. So Stephen Covey is, do you want to give us what do you know about Stephen Covey? Do you want to give us a...
I believe he wrote several, I think he wrote the 7
Habits of
a highly successful person.
Correct. So he wrote a series, and he's like one of those business mentors, life coaches, who's written a number of best-selling books, and one of the most popular ones was The 7 Habits of Highly Successful People, and he talks about an emotional bank balance. What that is when you meet somebody for the very first time, imagine you've got a bank balance with $0 in it, and that first interaction, if it's a positive one, you're making a deposit into it and you're growing it. But each time something negative happens, you're detracting from it. So when you meet somebody and you've met them for the very first time, obviously that first impression is really important because you don't want to go into the red straight away. But over time, and as you develop relationships with people, you can break trust, do something that slips up, make a mistake, hurt somebody without breaking the relationship because you've built up a lot of trust and emotional deposits in that emotional bank balance. For example, if I said I said to George, who's one of the Swatchmate CEO earlier today, like an example could be like if I met him for the very first time and said I don't like his moustache, then it's not going to go down very well. However, if I know I'm good mates with him, I can say, hey George, here we go. Everyone say hi to George. Perfect timing. What do we think of his moustache? I was just using it as an example. It's perfect timing. So this is George from Swatchmate, and if I said to him for the very first time that I met him that I don't like your moustache, obviously it's not going to go down well. I know him relatively well, so I can say that and get away with it. And basically, you can think about your interactions with other people as an emotional bank balance. Where do you sit? And when you are at the very early stages of those relationships, you want to make more deposits than withdrawals. First impressions definitely count. And first impressions in today's age are really very important, especially because a lot of the time first impressions are not done face-to-face. They can be done via email. And today I wanted to cover as well, what are you doing today that makes you look bad, that you're not aware of? Startup soft skills. So these are all relationships. Everything you do with a startup, if you're talking to customers, employees, investors, all these sort of things, they're not transactions or commodities, they're relationships and they last beyond one company. Good relationships will last you a lifetime and deliver a lot of benefit to both parties over that lifetime. I spoke to Stuart Richardson, who's a venture capitalist out of the York Butter Factory with Adventure Capital, and I asked him for his pet hates for this topic as well, so I've got a few of them in there. But he said to me, funding is not a transaction, it's a relationship. And that's really important. So first of all, never go to someone asking for funding, ask for advice first, and I'll touch on that in a bit more detail. So tonight, how do you come across like a professional? How do you avoid very simple mistakes that a lot of people make without being aware of that they're making them and that create friction? How do you prepare yourself to put your best foot forward when you're approaching somebody for the first time? And some practical tips as well. So a lot of tonight is going to come across as common sense. Voltaire, very smart person, said common sense is not so common. And I challenge everyone here tonight, including myself, to go away and really challenge yourself to say, do I actually use common sense when interacting with people? Because I think you'll go away and you think, well, hang on, there might be some times that I haven't followed what seems to be very basic advice and stuff that you know is right, not necessarily do. And I'd like to start with an example. This is an email that I received in February this year, and this is part of the reason why we're doing this masterclass on startup soft skills. Have read this email. I'm writing to you to find out how the MAP program can help me with the app which I'm currently designing. The app has massive upside and low downside risk, and I do not exaggerate when I say this. It is a type of app which could become a practical tool in the lives of every smartphone user. If we could arrange to have a chat on the phone to discuss how MAP could benefit my app, I'd greatly appreciate it. Let's have a look at that. And this is not the only email that I get like this. Let's dissect this. What is wrong with this email?
He's only talking about how you can help him.
Yes, absolutely. What else is there?
What's the app?
He hasn't said anything about what his idea is.
He's making a lot of assumptions.
What assumptions? Yeah, so he's making a lot of assumptions. What assumptions is he making?
Just, that you're readily available, for instance.
That I'm readily available. Another assumption that his app is the best thing in the world. In fact, I can go through this and say every sentence in this does not come across very well. I'm writing to you to find out how the MAP program can help me with the app which I'm currently designing. It's all about me. The app has massive upside and low downside risk. That reeks to me of ignorance. This guy doesn't actually know what he's talking about. And I don't exaggerate when I say this. Okay, well, it's a big claim. I'm glad you're not exaggerating. It can become a practical tool in the lives of every smartphone user. He hasn't at all mentioned what the app is, how it works, the team, what kind of traction they've got to date, has it been developed, is anyone using it? And if we could arrange to have a chat on the phone to discuss how MAP could benefit me, that would be fantastic. It's all about me and it's very one way. Now, I asked this gentleman if I could use this email as an example. Because this is one of those emails that I get. I get a lot of emails like this, but this is one where I said, I need to catch up with this guy and actually give him some feedback on this email, and I did. And he's a top bloke. He's just naive. And that's part of the reason why we're doing this masterclass tonight, because we get a lot of people who are just naive, doing things they're not aware, don't come across very well. This comes across terribly. Does anyone watch South Park? Does anyone know what this is?
Underpants gnomes.
Underpants gnomes. Do you want to run through it?
Phase 1, collect underpants. Phase 2, phase 3, profit.
Thank you. Fantastic. This is actually what Stu Richardson suggested to me to put up. Because when I get that email, this is what I think, that this guy's got no idea what's going on and doesn't understand the hard work that's going into it. It's not a professional email, it doesn't come across very well. There was a follow-up conversation after that email over the phone, which I won't go into the details of that, but that didn't shed much good light on this character either. But the guy is just naive, but a top bloke. And that's the thing, we realise that it's a learning curve, especially when you're at university and you haven't dealt with many people in a professional setting. And obviously looking around the room, there are a lot of professionals here tonight, but we can also go through some tips and tricks for people, even in a corporate setting, who might have worked for 30 years in a very successful career coming into the startup world and what they can learn. Before you email someone, what do you do? I'll give you 2 guesses. Read their website. Everyone has a website these days. The amount of emails that I get at MAP saying, hey, what's MAP and am I eligible? Well, if you go to the About Us section, you can find out if you're eligible. If you go to the About Us section, you can find out all about Startup Velocity and the other programs that we run. And that's the same for heaps of people that I've spoken to about people who are approaching them without having done any research on who they are and what service they provide and how the person who wants to contact them fits in with what they provide. And I've got some practical examples for this as well. Adventure Capital, like I said, is a venture capital firm here in Melbourne. Very first sentence about us. It's an early stage technology venture fund. And Adventure Capital is intently focused on advancing the digital and online technology ecosystem, benefiting from Australia's significant quantities of human capital and intellectual property by providing opportunities for innovative, driven and intelligent entrepreneurs to reach their full potential. What kind of businesses do you think Adventure Capital invests in? Anyone?
Tech companies. Yeah.
Tech companies. It's pretty simple. It's in their first sentence. This one gets a bit harder. This is the homepage of GBS Venture Partners. What kind of businesses do you think they invest in?
Life sciences.
Thank you. Now this might seem really stupid and commonsensical, but the thing is, a lot of people, Adventure Capital gets 600 emails a year or requests to pitch, of which they see 150, because people don't read their website. Another venture capital firm that I know, Starfish Ventures, receives 900 people inquiring on their website to pitch to them, of which they see 300. So Starfish Ventures sees 1 in 3 people come across because people don't read their website. And you think you might see this website and go, oh, well, they say they do life sciences, but maybe they do online as well. No, they don't, and they're making it patently clear online. And a lot of people just ignore people's website and go ahead and email them anyway. Blackbird Ventures is a venture capital firm in Sydney. How to get in front of us? They even help you do it. They say, we naturally take far more notice of founders introduced to us by people we trust, whether they be founders we've invested in, angel investors we have co-invested with, or people we have worked with. So please try to network to find a warm introduction. Alternatively, you can email us at contact@blackbird. Before you ignore this advice and do it anyway, please read this. And I've included a link in this presentation, which we'll put out later, and you can click through and see the link. The link is to a blog on how venture capitalists don't want to just meet you. They want to be introduced to you by somebody they trust, because automatically that's validation of you and your startup. And I've talked a lot about venture capital firms in the first few slides, but the same is said of mentors and anyone else, sales, any type of person that you're approaching. Find out who your audience is and how they fit in with what you're trying to do. Another really important thing that a lot of people aren't able to do is articulate their idea in layman's terms. And what I mean by that is, has anyone seen the film, I think it's Margin Call? It's got Jeremy Irons as the CEO of a really big company. And it's set about an investment bank during the global financial crisis. And they found out that overnight the balance sheet has got to a stage where they're probably going to be insolvent in the morning unless they dump a whole lot of really bad stocks in the next few hours. Has anyone seen that film? I think it's called Margin Call. If so, I'm seen it. Okay, cool. And in that meeting, they fly in the CEO of this massive investment bank to the boardroom for a meeting at 2 o'clock in the morning. And they get the analyst who had found this discrepancy in the numbers, and they put him in front of him. And the CEO says to him, explain this to me like you would explain it to a 4-year-old, because I don't understand the technical language. Again, the CEO has risen to the point where he's managing people, not technical details. If you can't convey your startup idea in layman's terms so anybody can understand it, you need to work on it until you can, in 2 sentences maximum. We talk about this in pitching. We've got a masterclass on pitching coming up with Tony Glenning from Starfish Ventures, but being able to convey your idea in layman's terms is really important. In terms of venture capital, if you're approaching a venture capitalist or any type of investor, are you eligible to receive investment from them? So what I mean by this is, do they have an investment mandate? An investment mandate is they only invest in certain types of companies. GBS Venture Partners only invests in life sciences companies. If you're not a life sciences company, don't bother approaching them. Do they only invest at a certain stage? So another venture capital firm here in Melbourne is called Square Peg Capital, and they are generally a later stage venture capital fund, which means if you're looking for $100,000, they're probably not going to do it. So it's not worth approaching them just yet. It might be in some circumstances, which I'll touch on, but you're better off finding, if you're looking at raising $50 million or $10 million or $1 million, where can you go to get that money? And if you're looking at raising $50, $100, $250,000, there's going to be certain people who won't invest at that level because it's too small for them. They only invest in companies in a certain region. Blackbird VC only invests in companies that are global from the outset, I should say. So they have international customers from day one or very quickly afterwards. So they're not going to, if you're only selling in Australia, they won't invest in you. And for example, MAP. You have to have a connection to the University of Melbourne in order to be eligible for the MAP Startup Accelerator. Did you pass this test? Have you gone through and actually understood your audience and who they are? Or are you going to waste their time by approaching them? Because it's not just a waste of their time, but it's also a waste of your time when you could be going out and making valuable connections with other people who are relevant to you. Again, do you understand your audience? How do you fit in? Are you ready? And I want to stress that as well, that Stuart touched on the funding being a relationship and not a transaction. So I'll put in here, you are ready. If you can find a company, if you're a web mobile type business who's just started out, you don't have much traction yet, you're still building a prototype, you aren't yet raising funds, but you think that in a few months' time you'll be looking to raise $300,000, and you want to just test the waters and see how you can go with that. It's perfectly acceptable to approach a venture capitalist or somebody and say, hey, look, this is what stage I'm at. I'd really love to be, to catch up with you for a chat, perhaps pitch you and understand what I need to do for you to invest in me. Start that relationship relationship sooner rather than later, but make sure you do it in the right way. Now, taking Starfish as an example, Starfish might say, look, thanks, there's no need to meet just yet, but it would be grateful if you can send through a pitch deck so we've got you on file. And they actually collect a lot of pitch decks from people who aren't yet ready, have them on file, so when you get back in touch with them when you are ready, they've already seen that you've made contact and they've got your pitch deck. And they've got a file management system specifically for that purpose. And all these venture capital firms do. They want to have you on record. They might not necessarily take the meeting with you, but you've established the relationship. And it's important to establish that relationship because it's like a marriage. You don't want to get into bed with somebody that you haven't spent a bit of time getting to know. You might not like them, they might not like you. And you need to understand how they operate and how you work together. Now, seeing that you've done all this, you've researched a website, and you're now getting ready to send an email, how can you put your best foot forward via an email, which is how a lot of initial interactions happen these days? Research them. Go to their About Us and their team page and read all of their biographies. Google people, try and find out if you have anyone in common that you know that they know. Look them up on LinkedIn as well. LinkedIn is a fantastic tool because you can see who's first, second, third degree connections. And if you want to pay for a professional account, you can see anyone. Don't need to necessarily do that. Find somebody in common that you both know. Another way is sometimes you get introduced to people via email that you don't know who they are, and if through random introductions via email. Look at their email address, look at what their domain name is and look that up. Find a person to email if you can, as opposed to an info@ or a home, just generic email address, and then email them. Ensure that you spell their name correctly. I'm going to go through some email tips, but this is from Twitter on 3 days ago. You'd be amazed how many people manage to type my name Alan with 1 L at bugherd.com, but then immediately type hi Alan with 2 L's. Now what that shows, if that's your very first interaction with somebody, that just reeks of lack of attention to detail. It's your very first impression, and you made a bad one because you can't spell their name right. And you managed to do it for the actual email, but not here. Another one is taking the time to find out somebody's title. I'm not talking about Mr. or Mrs. so much as doctor or not. A lot of people around in the university might be a doctor, and if you approach them and say, hi, Mr., or something like that, it actually comes across as you've done little research of their background. And I know of instances where people have applied for a job, and the person interviewing them was a doctor somebody or other. And the person who got the interview, there were a few people who were going for the job, but the person who got the job was the person who said in the first application process, dear Dr. So-and-so. Everyone else said Ms. or Mrs. or something. They didn't take the time. And that was a clear example of a person's lack of attention to detail. In terms of the email, don't email blast. And what I mean by email blast is having one email that you send to many people with, hi there, generic stuff. You all get them from companies across the world trying to sell you mobile development or something like that. At least I get a lot of them. And it's really frustrating. It also means they haven't taken the time to engage with you on a personal level. Again, not a great example. Basically, if anything, we get a lot of people coming to sending emails to the MAP generic website, so map@eng.unimelb.edu, and anything that says hi there, hi, whatever, we immediately delete because they haven't taken the time and you can tell, sorry, if you can tell that's just a generic email, delete, because they haven't taken the time to get to know us or what our program does. Therefore, why should we bother engaging with them? We don't know what they're all about. You're not going to pay them much time. Be polite and don't be arrogant. Again, coming back to that bad email example, that's just arrogant. Reeks of ignorance, basically. But the perfect recipe is humility plus confidence. And I'm talking about this a little bit later on about generic traits in Australia and overseas about how people interact. But be humble, but be confident. So you talk about what your business is and how it works and be positive about it. And again, when you meet somebody for the first time via email, that's a proxy for you. Now, again, some of this is going to seem like common sense, and it is common sense, but you'd be amazed how often it doesn't actually happen. In the email, dot point is golden. If you can, just do dot points. Hi, so-and-so, I'd like to talk to you about this. Dot point, cheers, so-and-so. Because we get tons of emails just with long waffling paragraphs that are just frustrating to read, and you get bogged down, you can't understand what they're actually after. Use dot points. If you're going to try and meet up with them for a coffee or a meeting or anything like that, say, how are you placed to meet up for a coffee? And one of the following 2 times. And spell it out for them. Give them the day, give them the date, and give them the time. And give them 2 options, preferably on different days. This takes away all the thinking from their end. They don't need to figure out if you say 3rd of March or 3rd of April. Is that a Thursday or is that a Friday? Make it as easy as possible for them. And then if they come back and say, yep, Thursday is great, look forward to seeing you then, you say, yep, thanks, great, I'll send you a calendar invitation. Because calendar invites are absolutely golden. If you don't know how to work your calendar, figure it out. Ron, figure it out. I briefly looked at my calendar yesterday when I was preparing for this, and I've got 24 items in my calendar for this week, and that's an average week for me, but it's certainly not nearly as many items in somebody's calendar who might be a venture capitalist looking at deals, trying to raise money for their own fund, all of these sorts of things. If you offer to send them a calendar invitation, you'll already, before you've even met them, made a good impression, because most people don't. Check your time zone. If you guys use Gmail, which a lot of you would, sometimes I've got emails for like a meeting at 3 o'clock in the morning and you have to write back and say, look, your time zone's whack, go and change it. You can go into settings and look at the time zone and make sure that it is for Melbourne, so you don't send calendar invitations for the wrong time. This is a good example of an email. So Ed Hooper is one of the co-founders of One-to-One-Cast, which is a company that went through MAP in 2012, and Stuart Richardson, who I've referred to before as a venture capitalist. This is the very first email Ed ever sent to Stu. And read it out. So hi Stu, when I'm in Melbourne during Feb, it would be great to catch up for a coffee as I'm keen to hear more about Adventure Capital, the York Butter Factory and how you found the GSB, so Graduate School of Business Exec Program. So the GSB is at Stanford University. At my end, I have an exciting project that I would like to share with you. Cheers, Ed. Now, so One-to-One-Cast went through MAP in 2012, and at the end of the program, they raised $250,000 from Adventure Capital and also the Optus Innovate Seed program. And they've gone on to raise a lot more funding since then. They've also now got a deal with Southern Cross Austereo, the largest radio network in Australia. They're one of the hottest startups in Melbourne right now. And this is his first email. Now, what he's done here is his research is clearly, this is a LinkedIn friend request. And what he's clearly done is he's gone and he's taken the time to research who Stu is and what he does. So first of all, when I'm in Melbourne during Feb, automatically know he's not in Melbourne, but then later he talks about the GSB. Turns out Ed was studying at Stanford at the time. Great to catch up as coffee, keen to hear more about what you do and how you found the Stanford program. He's clearly made it personal. And then he's been quick. At my end, I've got an exciting project that I'd like to share with you. That's all you need to do. Really simple, really quick, really easy. It doesn't matter if you're starting out for the very first time and haven't done anything before. Don't send an email saying you've got the best app in the world with massive upside and negative downside risk. Send an email like that. The meeting. I went out and found the cheesiest meeting photo I could find. Don't you love this? So politically correct. Don't turn up late. That's a really bad first impression for anything. It's like a date, just don't do it. Shake hands with everyone, and when I mean everyone, including females. The reason I say that is it's remarkable. I work with 2 associates, Maxine and Wen, and it's remarkable how many people come in, they'll shake my hand, but they won't shake their hands. And so already, I've got absolute trust in my associates, and it's a sign of a lack of respect. So in this day and age, shake hands with everyone. Don't get their name wrong. Happens all the time. Very simple stuff, but be pedantic about it. Go out of your way to make sure that you get the name right when you're emailing them and also when you're meeting them in person. And include everyone in the meeting, eye contact. Often you'll have a meeting with 2 or more people, and there'll be the head honcho and the other people in the meeting. Treat everyone the same. Make the people who aren't the head honcho feel incredibly special. Bill Clinton is said to be, by many, the most charismatic man in the world. And he's got amazing, by all reports, he doesn't just seduce women, he seduces everybody. And he, one of the things, his biggest strengths is his eye contact. He can make eye contact with anyone and make them feel like they're the only person in the room. He's incredibly charismatic. And he does that by making anyone he comes into contact with feel like they're the center of his attention. So make eye contact with people. Include everyone, even the people who might not necessarily be the ones who are the decision makers. Make them feel like rock stars too. Because later on, they'll remember it and they'll be very grateful for it. Because again, a lot of people don't do this. Very simple stuff to do. And by doing it, you make yourself seem even better because a lot of people don't do it. Don't make up anything on the spot. It's amazing how many times you meet an entrepreneur and say, hey, what's the market size for this? And they start rambling on for a few minutes. And in the end, you just say, look, don't worry about it. It's fine. It's fine. There are 2 scenarios. You don't know something and you don't know how to find out what the answer is, or you don't know something at that time but you can find out later. If you don't know something and you don't know how to find out, that's completely cool. Just say that. Look, I don't know, but I'd really love your help. If you have any advice on how to find this out, please help me. That's what mentors do. They're there to help you. Investors, people in general, will go out of their way to help you if you ask them. You don't know, but you can find out. Look, I don't actually know at the moment off the top of my head, but I'm going to go home and I'll find out and I'll email you back this afternoon. Same as a job interview. If you're in a job interview and you don't know the answer to a question, don't try and make something up. Say, look, I don't know yet, but I'll find out and I'll get back to you. Very simple stuff. Don't waffle. Pay for the coffee. If you're asking somebody for a coffee to talk about, either a business idea or that they could be a potential mentor for, a potential investor, and they've agreed to take the coffee with you, they've already given up some of their time to meet you. Do the common courtesy thing of giving them a coffee. Just shout them a coffee. And it makes, in the email, I'd love to shout you a coffee. Play to their ego. I'd love to shout you a coffee. You're amazing, so on and so forth. It works. Travel to them as well. When you are going to meet somebody for the first time, go to their offices. After the email, a follow-up email, if you've decided something at that meeting to do, follow up on it. Even the next day or the day after, say, hey, so-and-so, it was great to meet you. Thanks for your time. Appreciate what you said. I'm going to go away and think about it. Just lets them know that you've took on board what they're saying and you're going to do something with it. If you've agreed to deliver them something, if you say, that's great, I'm going to send you through a pitch deck, then go home and do it. And do it within the next day or so. It's amazing how many people don't follow up on emails and opportunities because they just don't send another email. Okay, so now on to introductions. Any startup ecosystem is heavily dependent on the strength and quality of the relationships between its participants. People go out of their way in the startup ecosystem across the world and in each region to make sure there are strong and valuable bonds between each participant. Because it's not like if you're an engineer or a doctor and you've got a one-on-one interaction with somebody, or you're building a bridge and you need to do the plans for it. If you work at KPMG and you need to do an audit, and you can do that all in your own office. In the startup ecosystem, at times, if you're building a business, you'll need to try and find mentors, investment, you'll need to try and get customers, you'll need to try and figure out how Google AdWords work, or Facebook ads work, or patents, IP, all of these sorts of things. There's a whole raft of different issues that you can't possibly know everything about. So how you get to know all those kinds of things is by knowing people who do know about those kinds of things. And so when it comes to any startup ecosystem, introductions get thrown about all the time. Understand that it's not a service. This is, again, in that very first email example, it wasn't very good. The lady up the back said that it comes across like the map is a service for you to take and pick and choose and interact with how you see fit. It's not the case. Same with introductions. They're not just a service to be used, a commodity to be taken advantage of. It's personal validation of the person that you're introducing. And coming back to common sense, you're not going to introduce somebody to somebody else unless you can personally vouch for that person, because otherwise it makes you look bad. So why would you expect anyone else to do the same? Because when it comes to anything and your own reputation, you don't want to have your reputation tainted by introducing somebody who you don't actually vouch for. I put Blackbird example in there. I was recently approached by somebody asking me to introduce them to Blackbird Ventures. Obviously, they read the website, they'd done some LinkedIn searching, they'd found me, and I was a friend of a friend. I said, oh, hey, sure. Cool, do you have a pitch deck you could send through? How are you guys going? What stage you're at? And how much money you're looking to raise? Now, I'm asking these questions because I know Blackbird only invests in companies that are global, and they only invest around $1 million plus. So if you're looking to raise $250,000, they're not the right person. And if you're only selling in Australia, they're not the right person. And I know this, so that's why I'm asking these questions. And he comes back to me and says, oh, well, we've got this kind of traction, we're doing well in Melbourne, but we haven't started selling outside of that. Do you reckon you can make that introduction? And I'm kind of like, well, no, I can't. Because I'm not going to go to Blackbird and say, hey, you should chat to this guy when he's clearly not at the stage when they're even going to take the meeting. And he hasn't sent me through a pitch deck. He hasn't answered the questions that I have. So why would I taint my reputation on introducing him to somebody that I know is not going to want to take the meeting? The other thing is, when you're asking for an introduction to somebody, can that person make the introduction that you're asking for? What I mean by this is we all know a lot of people, but you might not necessarily know them well enough to make an introduction for somebody else. If you happen to be family friends with the CEO of NAB, and Ron comes up to you and says, hey, would you mind putting me in touch? You're kind of like, well, it's actually, I know him, but I'm not actually at that stage where I can introduce you. Just be aware of these sorts of things. Just because somebody knows somebody doesn't mean they can put you in touch with him or her. If you are going to ask somebody for an introduction, make sure the person you're asking can vouch for you. If they don't like you, they're not going to paint you in the best light. If anything, it's going to do worse than better. And have you read their website? If you go to a friend and say, hey, look, I actually noticed that you've got a family friend who's the CEO of NAB, and I just wanted to let you know that I've got a fintech startup that's doing really well, and we just received $4 million in investment from Kleiner Perkins and Catalyst Partners, and we're doing really well. It'd be great to have a chat to your friend. Already, you've read their website and talked about fintech, and you might see that NAB's got some sort of focus on investing in startups or being more involved in innovation, these sorts of things. And if you can talk to that as well and say, and look, if, in terms of your website, NAB this, I saw you doing this, any chance I could do that? Well, you've got a better chance of getting that meeting, don't you? If you don't know if you're ready to speak to someone, that's perfectly fine. Ask for advice. It's far better to say to someone who you don't know necessarily where you stand in terms of getting an introduction, do you think I'm ready to speak to that person, than just saying, hey, can you introduce me? Because then you get a better understanding of what stage you need to be at in order for that introduction to happen. The other thing is, I talked about this before when I said, if you're trying to meet somebody for a coffee, put down the day, the date, the month, and the time. And then send them a calendar invitation. Try and make it as easy as possible for them. In this instance, if you're asking for an introduction, send them an email which they just can forward on straight away. They don't need to look at your website. They don't need to try and put something together and whip up in an email and send it off. Just give them something they can forward. You might have like a one-pager on your business or whatever it is that you can add as an attachment. And Zizan Tam, who's an entrepreneur in residence at MAP, and gave the last masterclass on global tech trends and thinking big, I asked him for his thoughts on this topic as well. And he made a really good point that when you're a student, you might feel like, well, I don't really know, I don't want to come across as too pushy with these people, and I don't necessarily want to, impinge on their time too much. But if you send an email like, oh, hey, I've been introduced to you, it'd be great to meet you. I'm based in somewhere, next time you're in the area, let me know, and it'd be great to catch up. And you think you're doing them a favor because you're saying next time you're near me, or, I don't want you to go out of your way, whatever it might be, I don't want you to go out of your way. It just comes across as wishy-washy. It doesn't come across as very strong. And it's not easy for that person as well. Just send them an email saying, hey, date, time, can you meet? Give them an email they can forward on, so on and so forth. And also report back. If Ronnie introduces me to Soam up the back there, and then I go have a great meeting with Soam, then it's really polite to go back afterwards and say, hey, Ron, I just want to say thank you for that introduction. I was really grateful. I had a great meeting with Soam, and these are the outcomes. I just want to say thank you. It's amazing how many people don't do that and how much it actually impacts what people do and how they think about you. Okay, again, when you're making an introduction, only make an introduction for somebody when you can vouch for them. Pretty simple. Are you willing to stake your reputation on them? The other way you can do, if you're not quite sure if someone is willing to take that meeting, send them an email saying, hey, so-and-so actually asked me for an introduction to you. Would you mind if I put them in touch? The double opt-in. And in terms of MAP to VC, I touched on this before, but MAP has good relationships with the venture capital community in Australia. But again, when it comes to the MAP Startup Accelerator, we give the money, we give the office space, and we give the mentoring throughout the program. But we can provide mentoring and we can provide introductions and those sorts of things to people who aren't part of the MAP Startup Accelerator, but only when they're ready. So we can introduce people to venture capitalists and all that sort of stuff. But again, you have to be at the right stage. So make sure you know who you're trying to approach and at what stage you are before you ask for an introduction. BCC is really helpful. This is an example I said that I just typed up yesterday. Thanks intro, Zizan. Now in BCC. Does everyone know what BCC is? Does anyone know what BCC is? Fantastic. Can you explain it?
He can see the email, but the other person can't see his email address.
Correct. So he can see the email, the other person can't see his email address, and when the next email happens, he won't be on the email too. BCCs is great. If you make an introduction, there's 3 people on the email, 1 person introducing somebody to somebody else. It's polite to have a BCC in there so they don't get a whole lot of backwards and forwards with the people trying to schedule a meeting after that. Use BCC and people will love you. Great to meet you over email. Also admit in the email that you're putting them in BCC because they can't see, the other person can't see that. As Zizan mentioned, I do blah, 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 and would welcome the opportunity to shout out your coffee. Welcome the opportunity is a great phrase, and use it. It's a great way of saying, hey, I'd really welcome the opportunity to speak to you about something. It's a great phrase that people actually, it comes across a lot better than saying, hey, can you help me with this, basically. How are you placed for either of time A, time B? Feel free to suggest an alternative. Look forward to meeting in person. It's short, it's sharp, it's to the point. You don't need to have a startup that you've sold or got venture capital for. You don't need to be some sort of rock star in the startup world. You can just ask. And people go out of their way to help other people in the startup community. Collaboration, this is another dirty word. Who would like to have a go at defining collaboration? Anyone?
Working together.
Working together is a good one. Actually, that's probably the best one. I get a lot of people, there are a lot of very successful business people who have started companies and done well, and they're now mentors for MAP and all these sorts of things. And you get a whole lot of emails from time to saying, hey, I noticed that you know this person, or they're on your advisory board, or this mentor, or whatever it might be. I would really love to have a chat to them and talk about how we can collaborate. What do you mean by that? Because collaboration can be so many different things, and a lot of people go into these things, these kind of situations thinking, you know what, this really successful business person is going to be absolutely fine with sitting down for me over an hour and just having a chinwag about how we can collaborate with my startup that has no prototype. It has no users, there's no benefit in them in necessarily taking that meeting just yet. So if you want to collaborate with someone, and you can perfectly go ahead and definitely do it, but make sure when you do go and approach somebody to collaborate, don't expect them to do the thinking. Come to them with a proposal. Go out of your way to do all the thinking for them. Don't expect them to do it, because if you want to, if you've got a startup idea that's in a certain industry and there's somebody else in an industry that is similar, and you think they'd be a great mentor for you, or that there might be possible partnerships between you and that company, find out what those partnerships could be and describe them. Put them down in paper and send an email saying, hey, would love to have a chat to you. This is what I'm thinking. Have a look. Maybe it's an attachment if it is a little bit more complex. Use diagrams, all that sort of stuff. If you're interested, let me know. Or, better than if you're interested, let me know, follow up with them. So please have a look. I'll follow up with you next week to see if you're available for a coffee the week after. Social media. Who here accepts friend requests from strangers? A couple of people. Why do you accept friend requests from strangers?
Oh, just I got
Good-looking girls?
I don't know.
If there's second-degree connections?
I don't even check. I'll just accept anyone.
All right, there you go. Well, that's probably not a good example, but I don't accept friend requests from anyone on Facebook. It's a bit different on LinkedIn, which is a professional network. Facebook is very tricky, and professionally as well. How many people do you want to be friends with who you work with, or who are involved in your business idea, whatever it might be? How many of them do you actually want to be friends with on Facebook? Because chances are, if you've got photos from university days at parties and all that sort of stuff, is that a good thing for them to be seeing, all of your posts, this sort of stuff? And that's an age-old debate which you all know about. In LinkedIn, you can, what I'm trying to say is don't necessarily go don't send a Facebook friend request to anyone you've just met. It's a little bit creepy. LinkedIn is slightly different. If there's people who you've come across that might be second-degree connections, you might have heard their name, they keep popping up as being someone who's a friend of somebody else, you can connect with them on LinkedIn, but tailor the message. Don't have one of those generic ones. There's lots of people who send me invitations to connect on LinkedIn and they haven't tailored the message, and I'm kind of like, well, if you haven't taken the time to find out who I am or how we can, why we should be friends on LinkedIn, then why would you accept that invitation? Some people do use LinkedIn just to get as many people as possible, because it is a broadcasting tool when you update your status, and that's one way to do it. But just be aware that other people use LinkedIn and Facebook differently to how you might use it. Twitter is another good way to get in touch with people. Because anyone can follow anyone on Twitter, you can actually reach out to them via Twitter and say, hey, actually I saw you're going to be in Melbourne on this date. If they're coming out from overseas, would love the chance to catch up with you. Here are my contact details. You can use Twitter, and people have used it to good effect to try and get meetings. And on to NDAs. So I'll put that down the bottom because I didn't want to slide to the next slide just yet. Who here has got a startup idea and thought about making someone sign an NDA before they saw it? A couple here, not a whole lot. Okay. I don't mean to offend you, but read this. Don't ask any potential investor to sign a non-disclosure agreement, NDA, because asking them to do so will make you look clueless. That's a really brutal statement. but it's really important. Now, Guy Kawasaki is a very well-known entrepreneur and author and is a venture capitalist as well. Now, there are certain times to ask people to sign an NDA, and there are certain times, and pretty much every other time, you don't. And the reason for this is, does everyone know what a non-disclosure agreement is? Getting donuts here. All right, so non-disclosure agreement is an agreement that you're going to keep everything confidential. You're not going to talk about it to anybody else. And you get a lot of people coming in and asking venture capitalists or angel investors or accelerators to sign an NDA. If you go through the NDA process, it's a legal document. So if you ask someone to, you've got a startup idea, you want to talk to a venture capitalist about it, you go to them and you say, hey, I'd love to have a chat to you about my idea, but I want you to sign an NDA first. They then have to, if they were going to do it, read that NDA, which is a lengthy legal document. Then on their proviso that they're happy with all of it, they need to sign it and send it back, but chances are there'll be parts where they're not happy with it and they need to negotiate on that part of that NDA and then change it and send it back, all this taking up a lot of time that they probably don't have. Then they have to keep track of all the NDAs they've signed and all the different industries and fields and all these sorts of things, which they're not going to do. And then it's also going to prevent them from looking at similar deals. Now, the way that this industry works is there are obviously many different things happening in many different industries, but there is overlap. And you can't expect somebody to sign an NDA because they're going to be in web mobile or whatever it might be, because chances are they're looking at a number of other deals at the same time, and if they sign that NDA, it's going to preclude them from looking at the other stuff, and that's got no value for them. The other part of it is ideas are pretty much worthless. And the reason they're pretty much worthless is because the hard part with an idea is the execution of that idea. How many people, you might have had a startup, you might have done a startup already, you might be doing one now. Chances are you speak to the people about that startup and somebody has come up to you and said, oh, I had that idea, but I never worked on it. And you've probably felt, you know what, I had that idea, but I am working on it. And it's the execution that is key. If somebody can execute upon their idea to build a company, that's really, really difficult. Anyone can have an idea. So trying to say that someone's going to steal your idea and work on it, not really going to fly, because the idea is not the hard part, it's the execution. And venture capitalists, investors know that better than anyone else. Technological innovation does have value. So there's one instance like NDAs might have some relevance in those situations. But you can still have meetings without having them signed. So for example, Braden Kidd is a MAP14 entrepreneurial fellow. And when he went through MAP, he's got an engineering innovation which basically allows people to store power in DC, but it's compatible with AC appliances. And the way that that works is a really, it's an innovation, it's a breakthrough. So when he goes to meetings, he can say that, he can describe what it is. But he doesn't need to say, in his words, the secret herbs and spices. He just talks about what the technology does, he doesn't talk about how it operates. And you can do that. And the last part is a lot of people think that if you have an idea, people are going to steal it, and that venture capitalists who might have good networks in venture capital and in getting money and entrepreneurs and all that sort of stuff, they want to steal your idea. It's naive. They don't want to steal your idea. People work on ideas for a reason. They're passionate about that idea and solving that problem. And generally the person who's most passionate about solving that problem is the best person to go ahead and execute it. And frankly, venture capitalists have got their own stuff to worry about. A lot of these people in these industries don't want to steal your idea. And if they did, their careers would be over. If somebody in venture capital at an accelerator program had someone come and pitch them, and then they took that idea and implemented it themselves, their reputation would be in tatters. And the last part of this is the Mark Suster link. So Mark Suster is an entrepreneur and venture capitalist, and there's a link here. So if you get the slides, you can click through to it on a blog post that he's done. And there's a few other blog posts within there about why you shouldn't sign an NDA or why you shouldn't ask somebody to sign an NDA. One of the comments that he makes is you don't want to accept investment from somebody who does make you sign an NDA, because it shows that they're clueless too. Can anyone guess what this is about? Good. Don't do it, basically. There are going to be plenty of times you have meetings with people that don't necessarily go well or go to plan, or they might try and be mentors to you and they're not really appropriate and they try and give you advice and it doesn't resonate with you. Don't burn bridges. Don't wave them off. Don't be rude to them. Don't say yeah thanks but no thanks and to be dismissive of them, because everyone at some stage can provide value to you and everybody has something that you can learn from them. I put this in a blog post that I did last week about the importance of mentors and how they're probably more important than seed funding for early stage founders. And that's something that I learned from my mother, which is tact is telling someone where to go so nicely that they enjoy the trip. So if you do have a meeting that is terrible, send them an email afterwards, but don't be rude, don't be aggressive, don't be any of these sorts of things. Just tell them where to go so nicely that they enjoy the trip. And sometimes in the heat of the moment that can be really hard, but in that moment, respond, don't react.
How would you advise kind of startups that are in really early stages and they're trying to secure a first customer, but that first customer's got a really big ego, they know that you're an early stage startup, they know that you're desperate to make a deal, so they try and impose really restrictive kind of conditions on that first deal and they try and leverage their position? How would you advise
Great question.
that situation?
I wouldn't take the deal. In any startup, there's going to be early adopters and they're the people who you want, evangelists for your business and all that sort of stuff, and people who value what you provide even before it's probably ready to be provided. They're the type of people that you want as first customers. If you have someone bearing down on you, trying to put aggressive terms on you and bully you into a deal, they're not the right person. And then if it gets, and if you're not comfortable and you get to a stage where it's just not working for you, say, thanks, really appreciate your time. I think that we need to go back to the drawing board, just retreat a little bit and get out of there and say, we'll be back in touch when we think we're ready to provide a deal that works for you. But don't take the deal if it's not good for you. Now some hints. Don't use jargon. A lot of people use a lot of jargon, and the most successful business people that I've come into contact with don't use jargon. Things like socialized documents. I heard that once and almost fell off my chair. Someone wrote a document. It's like, all right, let's socialize this amongst the team. Like, what are you talking about? You're going to send it to the team? Are we all going to chat to each other? No. Synergies, all that kind of stuff. Just don't use them. It's just management consultants and business analysts use them, and it's already a turn off as soon as you hear it, so don't. Don't be defensive. One of the really big things is if you're trying to approach a mentor and get somebody on board to help you with your business, don't be defensive. Don't defend everything you've done if they're giving you advice. Now, what I mean by that is if someone says, hey, have you thought about this? Don't come across as being really aggressive and saying, no, we're not doing it that way, we're doing it this way, I've already thought about it. It's kind of like have an open mind, accept that people have different perspectives and different experiences, and a lot of times you're going to get advice which might not be right for you. But make the decision that it's not right for you and move on. You don't need to necessarily get caught up on it. You don't need to get really defensive and aggressive. Be coachable. That follows on from don't be defensive. There's no investor who's going to make an investment in a startup if the person isn't coachable, if they're not going to listen to any advice. You don't have to take the advice, but at least listen to it. Have an open mind. It's really important. Australians. A bit of a random thing to put in there, but I wanted to include it. We touched on this at a MAP outreach event a couple of weeks ago about how Australians generally, as a culture, have a self-deprecating attitude, always kind of putting themselves down or being self-deprecating about their achievements. Like someone says, oh, you won this race, and you're like, yeah, it's no big deal. Not the best idea in the startup landscape, because in the startup landscape, it's a global landscape. What I mean by that is, and the other part of that is the tall poppy syndrome as well, which we know exists in Australia and we're trying to eradicate. When you have a startup, don't put yourself down, don't put your startup down. Be proud of your accomplishments, don't be boastful. It's pretty simple. And I put Americans here as a good example of this. Americans, most of the time, well, Americans have the ability to be very proud of their achievements, generally. I'm generalizing here, obviously. Very proud of their achievements without coming across as boastful. But if you ask, my experience with the people in the startup community in America is if you ask somebody about their business, say, look, yeah, we built this business and it was really hard, but we're really proud of where we've come. We've signed up 30,000 users who are each paying this, that, whatever. We raised $4 million of venture capital and we're doing this now. And that attitude is actually refreshing, it's positive, it's confident. Sometimes Australians tend to be self-deprecating, so don't think that you need to kind of put down your own accomplishments. It's not a good way to go forward. I think you share your idea. A lot of people are very, very reclusive with their ideas, and it's not a positive thing. So, for example, that bad email example, when we did have the phone call afterwards, the guy's like, he asked me for advice to chat about his idea, and I get on the phone with him. He's like, actually, I don't want to tell you too much because you might steal it. So why do you want to talk to me? So share your idea with as many people as possible, because it's amazing how many people very quickly can help you realize your vision for that business. And what I mean by that is, I've got a business called RosterCloud, which provides HR management software to events companies. I was catching up with my cousin and one of my mates for lunch. And they're like, what are you up to these days? I'm like, I started RosterCloud, this is what we're doing, so on and so forth. And this guy said, well, you know what? My friend's mum has a friend who's an admin assistant at this catering company, Do you want me to ask them if you can have a chat? I said, well, yeah, that'd be great, thank you. And that's a company that we went and I met the HR manager there through that really random connection, and we signed them up as a client a few weeks later, and that's to date still our largest client. And if you hadn't shared your idea, that opportunity would have never come about. And again, coming back to NDAs and sharing your idea, people don't understand necessarily when they get started that sharing your idea is a very positive thing, because opportunities make themselves available when you're open with your idea. And when you come across as reclusive, if you say, I've got this great idea but I can't talk about it yet, well, people are like, well, no one can help you. In a meeting, don't look away. How many times have you guys been in meetings with people and they're like, looking at you, and then they look at the clock, and then they look at somebody else, and a girl walks past, they look at them. Don't do it. Pay full attention. Do the Bill Clinton thing to a certain extent, and make good eye contact, but only eye contact. Pay full attention and listen, don't just hear. A lot of people are really, really bad at, they're really, really good at hearing, they're not very good at listening. If you go and take it, if you're looking to engage with someone as a mentor or an investor and you're asking them for their advice, just shut up and listen, just take it on board. And that's one of the things as well that I learned when building up Roster Cloud, was that every pitch that we made to a client could be enhanced by asking them about their business first. A lot of the time you get into a client or a potential sale and you say to them, hey, this is our service, it's great, you should use it. But you can actually tailor the pitch you give them based on their business if you listen to them first. And a lot of people are not aware that they should sit down and just listen. You don't necessarily need to sprout that off. Listen, don't just hear. So this is kind of the final slide. What we would like as the Melbourne Accelerator program and what we're trying to do around campus is a few different things. Firstly, one of the things that is one of our pet hates is people who register for events and don't attend. Obviously, you did register for an event and you have attended, so thank you. But if you see people who do register for events and don't attend, it does make it more difficult for us to run these events. Secondly, it's not a zero-sum game. It's not something where if you win, somebody else loses in terms of interactions with other people. It's one of those things, like I said before, where a startup community is built upon the fact that people do interact with each other. They make interactions for each other. The more computer scientists we have working here in Melbourne, the more designers we have, the more startups happening, the more attention corporates are paying to entrepreneurship, the better it is for everybody. Pay it forward. When you, hopefully today, you'll hopefully picked up a few tips and tricks or been made aware of things that you should be doing but not necessarily do every time. Use those tips and tricks and pay it forward. If someone sends you a crap email, let them know. Because what we want is we want UniMel entrepreneurs and people affiliated with the university, when they go out to interact with people, we want them to have a reputation as being the most charismatic, and understanding that when they do approach, the venture capital community in Australia and overseas knows, hang on, this person went to University of Melbourne, they've been taught the basics, they understand how to pitch, they understand about startup soft skills, they understand about this, and so on and so forth. We want to provide a great quality of deal flow to global investors. And part of that is engaging with them appropriately through startup soft skills. And the last one is spread the word. So go out and tell people, kind of touches on with pay it forward, and that, tell people if they do send a crap email, that it was not so good, but also spread the word. Go out there and say, hey, look, be aware of, make sure you practice what you preach, so to speak. And that kind of wraps up my presentation. So if you have any questions, do let me know.